do you know who that was? And she looked at me and said, no, who was that? Now, this is a molecular biologist, right? And I said, that was Johnny Cash. And she looked me right in the eye, serious she could be, and said, who's Johnny Cash?
Tell me about Johnny Cash and your wife.
Well, we were doing show openings with lasers and special effects. So we were invited in the Country Music Awards one year, and it was a disaster, which you can read about in my book, I might add. So when it was over, I, of course, retreated to the bar because that's the kind of guy I am. And Gloria was getting her PhD in molecular biology. So showbiz, and Gloria was just kind of,
Gloria's your wife.
My wife, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So I retreated to the bar. And boy, if you go to a backstage bar at a country western show, it's really something. And so when I came out, here's this huge crowd of people, huge, must have been 200, in a circle, standing around this tall guy dressed in black, and my wife. And I'm looking at this saying, what's this now? And finally the people kind of wandered off, and he wandered off, and I went up to Gloria and I said, what did he say to you? And she said, just a bunch of nonsense. And you know, Jerry, she's never told me. I swear.
Oh, you don't know what he said?
No, I'm going to be in my deathbed. And she's going to say, now I'll tell you.
Right.
So the next question I asked her is, I said, do you know who that was? And she looked at me and said, no, who was that? Now, this is a molecular biologist, right? And I said, that was Johnny Cash. And she looked me right in the eye, serious she could be, and said, who's Johnny Cash?
What year is this?
God, I was thinking about that. It had to be 5 years before he died, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I was just going to ask
probably
you.
Lucky for me.
Yeah, right. Particularly at that time in your life, and many of your life can be explained or exemplified by the questions that you had down that I just read. What's your biggest mistake?
Now that's a good question. I would have to say it's both a mistake and a virtue, I guess, is that, and I'm sure you've seen it too, that there are people, I'll bet you know, that I know, who at 4 say, I want to be a broadcaster, or I want to be a doctor. So I would say probably the biggest mistake was hopping around from one thing to another. I've regretted that sometimes. But on the flip side, doing that, each time I did that, it was a chapter in my book. Yeah. So I would have to say that if I could point to anything, it'd probably be that there were some things I wish I would have stuck with longer.
Mm-hmm. But,
at the time, you don't know. And I did see the results of a big survey Harvard did the other day of people over 80, I think it was. And, Jerry, not one said they regretted anything they'd done, but every single one said they'd regretted the things they didn't do.
Yeah, that's right. And I was going to say, if somebody was to ask me that same question, what my biggest mistake was, I would think that it would be something monetary, something I had, because I've made 7-figure mistakes and I've made 7-figure wins. So
welcome to the club.
That's right. Right. And so I'd pick one of the 7, probably the biggest 7-figure mistake I made, and I would go with it. I would never think about, I'm 52 years old. It would never come to me that I would think about some decision I made in life. And I've said this before on the podcast, I don't have regrets. There are things that I did wrong. There are things that I wish I would have done differently, right? And there are things I wish I had done, opportunities I had taken advantage of, things of that nature. But I don't regret it because it just took me in another direction. And much like your life, my life is, is full of these stories. And I had a very violent background, and again, ending up where I did from where I started is a story in and of itself. And so I always looked at everything was just another chapter, and I would never look back on it and say, certainly I wish I would have invested in Apple when I had an opportunity 15 years ago, right?
Yeah,
but I didn't. Those sorts of things where, I suppose you could say that you regret that. But really for mine is monetarily and life-wise, again, things you do right, things you do wrong. But I don't have any regrets or view almost anything that I did as a mistake post being a grown-up, right? I mean, when you're a kid, that's a whole nother world.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.